Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aikman. I'm so glad that you joined us this morning. We have a lot to talk about as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Of course, we're going to be talking about DeSantis stepping out of the presidential, or what do they always say, suspending his campaign for president, what that means going into New Hampshire. Of course, New Hampshire is tomorrow. It's a very big, some say, make or break day for Nikki Haley, so we'll be talking about her. She seems to be going a little more on the attack mode against the former president. So we'll be talking about that as well. First of all, I want to mention this. I'm so glad that this came across my desk from Newsbreak. They listed the 10 most beautiful places to live in upstate New York that are still affordable. New York State is known for a few things: gigantic skyscrapers, insane nightlife, cultural diversity, and the ever-increasing cost of living. Well, that's for sure. Even though it might seem like New York is incredibly expensive, there are many places where this is completely untrue. In fact, some of the most breathtaking places in this state are actually the most reasonably priced. All this data comes from the Council for Community and Economic Research's Cost of Living Index. So the reason I mention this, number one on the list, Hornell. For those of you seeking to leave the city behind, and venture into a rural paradise, the city of Hornell is for you. According to Future Forest Consulting, Inc., Hornell has been given the nickname of the Maple City due to its abundance of maple trees. In addition, the city is surrounded by the Allegheny Mountains, which provide a beautiful backdrop for all the residents who live there. If you're a nature lover who's looking for quiet and affordable city to move in New York, Hornell may be the perfect match for you. So congratulations to our friends in Hornell. And speaking of our friends in Hornell, we had this gentleman on the program early on. I'm in the works to have him back on very soon, and that's Mayor John Buckley. He had this to say about the Newsbreak article. Hornell being ranked first on this list is a nice reminder of how truly blessed we are to live in such a beautiful city, nestled in the gorgeous valley. As I mentioned in my State of the City address, Hornell continues to lead the region in affordability. Whether it's water, sewer, garbage collections, or the myriad of services the city offers, there is tremendous value living here in the Maple City. So thank you to Mayor John Buckley for providing that quote for us to read this morning. If you're curious who else made the list, because let's face it, we do have a penchant here of putting down the state occasionally, but it's nice to be reminded that there are some places where it is still affordable. Hornell being number one. Buffalo, interesting, at number two. And Buffalo is a hot spot right now for younger people. 3, Hudson. 4, Lake Placid. 5, Olean. Hey, Olean, not that far away. Niagara Falls coming in 6. Geneseo at 7. Albany. Ooh, I thought Albany was very expensive, but that's at 8. 9, Cortland. There you go. The city of Cortland is truly a hidden gem, they say. And finally, finishing off the top 10, Syracuse. So there you go. Thank you again to Mayor Buckley, and congratulations to Hornell for keeping things affordable. Speaking of New York, when we come back from the break, we have a couple things here about Hochul before we get into the presidential race. It is down, of course, to Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. What does DeSantis dropping out mean? DeSantis, of course, endorsing the former president in his speech. So that is a boost to Trump leading into New Hampshire, though I don't think, most DeSantis supporters would also, I believe, be Trump supporters. That maybe DeSantis was their first pick and Trump could be a second, or maybe they have issues with Trump's style, so that's why they went with DeSantis. So it'll be interesting to see if that translates to more votes. As of this morning, I saw that Trump is leading Nikki Haley by double digits in New Hampshire, and many have said, well, I shouldn't say that. There's articles that say it's do or die. The New Hampshire is the campaign for Nikki Haley, that she has to win it. But then her own people, surrogates and like that, started downplaying that, saying, well, no, just a strong showing. So that's going to show you that maybe some of the internal polls not looking good for Nikki Haley, but we'll talk about that when we come back. A few things here about Hochul and her favorability and some plans that she has moving forward. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Our beautiful view of Marcus Street, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. You're watching Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Just one quick thing. Sorry to all the Buffalo Bills fans out there. I know it's a heartbreaker. There's a piece from the messenger.com. I just want to pick your brain for a moment. A pay-per-view Super Bowl. It may happen sooner than you think. I know throughout the years people have talked about it. Surprised that it's not on some type of pay-per-view platform. I assume that there are some number of people, the Super Bowl is the only game they watch the entire year, and they don't want to be left out. That's a pretty great place to be for a live event. 50% of the country does not want to be left out. It means, or it leads me to a slightly different discussion. If half the country is watching your game and you're watching it for free, how many of those people would pay a big sum of money to watch the game? So Joe Concha believes that it's probably going to happen sooner rather than later. Would you pay to watch the Super Bowl? Okay, so I mentioned this before we went to break. Let me put it up on the screen here. According to a new Siena poll, Hochul's favorability rating is up 6 points. It's the first time it's positive since February. But voters think Hochul will not make progress, making New York safer, more desirable, the world's AI capital, or fixing its mental health care system. So her favorability is up, but look at all these horrible things they don't believe she's going to make any progress on. I would have to agree when it comes to making New York safer. Of course, she does a little thing here or there for some window dressing, but nothing of real substance. We've talked about it ad nauseum on this program. But what would lead us to believe that New York will be safer under the policies coming from Albany? So she has a 45-42 favorability rating. That's up from 40-43 in November, and the first time she's been positive since February. Good news and bad news this month for the governor. On the good side, for the first time in nearly a year, more New York voters now view Hochul favorably than have an unfavorable view of her. While nearly two-thirds of Democrats view her favorably, she is viewed unfavorably by 23% of Democrats, 51% of independents, that's a big number, and 77% of Republicans. Similar, Hochul's job approval rating is the best it's been since last March, even as more than half of independents and more than three-quarters of Republicans disapprove of the job she's doing as governor, offset by 72% of Democrats who approve. At the same time, on several issues Hochul has championed, voters think she will not make progress in the next year. Voters think 54-33 that Hochul will not make living in New York more desirable. Yeah, again, I mean, you see the policies coming out of Albany. What would lead you to believe that she's going to make progress on fixing the mental health care system or making New York safer or more desirable? Now, I didn't realize making New York the AI capital was a serious conversation. I mean, I did not see that on the radar, but apparently it's a goal of Hochul's. She is going to boost fines on illegal New York City weed shops. This is interesting. I don't know if this will translate to upstate as well, because we've seen them pop up. Hochul recently unveiled her latest weapon against illegal pot peddlers, who have only managed to grow even more in number since last year. I read someplace, I think it was a Post, that there was 30 illegal shops surrounding the one legal shop in New York City. The regulators, who are from the Office of Cannabis Management and don't carry guns, have been refused entry by some merchants selling marijuana without a license. While the state recently passed a law to help shut down illegal shops, the proposed stiffer fines are designed to put the squeeze on their owners in the meantime. Quote, "People are going to test the process," said New York City Sheriff Anthony Miranda. "Fines can't be the cost of doing business. Fines have to be a tremendous impact on operations." Right now, it's about $4,000 to $20,000, depending, for the first time refusal, and $8,000 to $40,000 for subsequent. Why does it say that? Bulking under Hochul's proposed law. The move is the latest in a long line of attempts by the state to rein in illegal cannabis. Yes, there has been quite the struggle even here in upstate, and I don't know why they specifically say illegal New York City weed shops. We have talked with Sheriff Allard in the past, and as he said, I'll help any way I can. but they put all of the power in the Office of Cannabis Management, and they're understaffed. A lot of it is for PR and for show. Kind of, you think of the Untouchables, Elliot Ness. It's more about the photograph, I believe, than really doing anything of substance. When we come back, we're going to talk quickly about Mike Johnson. Then we are going to get into DeSantis. Let me ask, I mentioned this with Joe Sempolinski. It does not look like, but I could be wrong depending on how dogged Nikki Haley is. It does not look like New York State will play a major role in the primary. But if it were, like last time, still very important last time, would you have thought of voting for DeSantis? I mean, he was kind of doomed from the beginning, that horrible rollout, not doing media, not really showing the personality that we know he has, and then a lot of overspending. I read an article about they hired all these people and overhired and then had to get rid of half of them within 2 months behind the scenes in his campaign, because he ran his campaign, if you remember, with a super PAC, which is kind of a new way of doing things. So anyway, we've got to take a short break. I know I'm running long. I'm getting on a tangent here, but we do have a comment from a viewer. Go Detroit Lions. Been around since 1934 and never won a Super Bowl. At least the Bills won championships in the AFL in 64 and 65. Bills fans endorsed the Detroit Lions. Uh-oh. That person's speaking for all Bills fans. Do you agree? Stay with us. We'll be right back. Having fun this morning on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Thank you so much for joining us here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV Big Fox. I am your host, Frank Acom. We just had a comment from a viewer, never DeSantis or Haley. Okay, there we go. Made it clear. I asked the question, would you have supported DeSantis? Was he ever on your radar? He kind of fell off of a lot of people's radars quick. I don't know if it was a disastrous rollout, not really getting any traction. But anyway, we'll talk about that in just a moment. First, expect a lot more of these articles. House GOP already considering a future without Johnson. Now, this is the second article that we've mentioned on the program, so this is going to be a common talking point in the media. The new speaker's future as Republican leader is tied to the party's performance in November, if he can hang on that long. Speaker Mike Johnson is beset with political challenges. At least 2 conservative lawmakers have begun threatening his job. The former acting speaker trashed Johnson's performance this week. A border policy shutdown with the Senate and White House draws nearer every day. And then there's the problem of the 2024 campaign. A growing number of House Republicans are increasingly frustrated with Johnson's leadership and whispering about whether he can hang on to the role after 2024, if he even makes it that far. I mean, if you really think about it with McCarthy, Johnson's been doing pretty good. I mean, he's been there how long? A couple months now. A growing number of House Republicans are increasingly frustrated with him. Okay. Despite serving barely 3 months, there we go, as Speaker, the Louisianan is already facing an immediate threat from Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is openly disparaging him and suggesting she may try to boot him from the speakership, saying, I don't think he's safe right now. The only reason he's speaker is because our conference is so desperate. Well, that's a great line. Few Republicans are prepared to join Greene, at least at this point, but more than 100 of them signaled frustration with Johnson's approach to government spending by opposing a funding patch on Thursday, including Elise Stefanik, who we are going to talk about in just a little bit. Hint, hint. So a lot of criticism of Mike Johnson. He's been, noticeably quiet. 2024 is right around the corner. Well, I mean, technically we're here, but the campaign season. So it'll be interesting if he can gain some traction or if he goes the way of McCarthy. Hey, by the way, I wanted to mention this just in passing so you're aware. It doesn't affect us necessarily here in New York, but did you see that Steve Garvey, the baseball player, has a potential chance to flip a California Senate race, seat, which was actually Dianne Feinstein's seat? That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Steve Garvey is betting his star power can break California Republicans' losing streak. Just don't ask him how. Okay. Trying to put him down in this political piece. That'll be very interesting. Garvey's entrance into the race last fall barely registered among California's political class, which were more focused at the time on the three-way battle between Barbara Lee, Katie Porter, and Adam Schiff. But just last month, Garvey clocked in at 19%, placing him in a statistical dead heat for second place behind Schiff, the Democrat frontrunner, and giving him a shot and making it out of the state's jungle primary and into the top two runoff in November. For the first time in a long time, Republicans in California feel they just might stand a chance at statewide office, even if that chance isn't all that great. Still, so far, Garvey appears to be running his race like a cameo, popping up in campaign stops just like he did on old TV programs like The Young and the Restless and Baywatch. He'll talk all day about baseball, career politics, and the need for teamwork in Washington. Just don't ask the first-time politician to get specific about the issues. So they're trying to knock him down a peg. A little bit nervous that maybe a Republican could win that seat. So we'll be watching that closely. You remember the name, of course, Steve Garvey, a baseball legend. Can he do it? Boy, that'd be exciting, wouldn't it? All right, we've got to take another short break. When we come back, Ron DeSantis suspending his 2024 campaign. I like that. It's always suspending. There must be some legal reason for that. And he did endorse the former president, which is kind of a blow against Nikki Haley. Did Tim Scott end up, do you know, I never saw an update. He was going to endorse Nikki Haley, which many thought was also very bad for Nikki Haley because of South Carolina coming out. But we'll talk about Ron DeSantis when we come back. So stay with us. This is, Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. A beautiful morning here on Market Street. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. This is Frankly Speaking on Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. So someone did confirm. I know that Tim Scott was set to endorse Trump. I did not know if they had made it official, but this viewer said that they did, and I think that's a good move. Then I hear from another viewer, I'm thinking that Trump will pick a running mate whose name fits good on a sign, like Scott or Vance, meaning Tim Scott and J.D. Vance. I've got to say, I've heard this from a few people. Yes, Tim Scott endorsed Trump. CNN said so. Thank you. I guess we can trust that then. And then another comment, Tim Scott endorsed Trump last week. I missed the official announcement. I saw that he was going to, but I never got to see the official announcement. But I've heard from a lot of people, so it is anecdotal, but really like Tim Scott in that VP position. I would tend to agree. I like Tim Scott a lot. I had the pleasure and the honor to interview him a few years ago on the radio. Just a nice, personable guy. This person believes Stefanik is too many letters. That could be. But there is yet another piece, this one from the Washington Post, and we mentioned one on Friday or Thursday. Elise Stefanik generates VP speculation as she campaigns with Trump. The New York Republicans' evolution from moderate to MAGA has drawn speculation about her prospects as Trump's potential pick for vice president if he wins the nomination. Even after giving her remarks, one person yelling, VP. When she approached reporters, Stefanik echoed Trump, again asking attendees, Trump supporters, are we ready to take questions from the fake media? It was Stefanik's second public appearance in the Granite State in less than 24 hours for Trump, as he and his allies are hoping for a decisive win on Tuesday that will bring an early end to the Republican nomination process. Stefanik, the number 4 House Republican, symbolizes the shift of GOP officials in the Trump era. Once a Trump critic, a view for which he was celebrated among Republicans who had opposed his 2016 presidential bid, Stefanik has risen within the party over the year and fully embraced Trump. But her drop in trip to New Hampshire, as well as visits from Senator Tim Scott and Senator J.D. Vance, has prompted speculation beyond the state's primary. Whom would Trump pick as his vice president if he becomes the nominee? Trump's 2016 campaign, Stefanik said that she didn't like him. They're going to keep putting that out there, that she's more moderate. I think Stefanik's interesting, not just because she's from New York. That I would say is probably the biggest strike against her. Because why would you pick someone from a state where you're guaranteed to lose? We would have 2 New Yorkers on the ticket, Stefanik and Trump, if that were the case. I do think she's very talented. I do think she's very good at what she does. I don't think that would be a bad choice. And I don't think Tim Scott, as I mentioned earlier, or J.D. Vance. But Tim Scott is just an interesting thought to have him as VP because he does such a good job. I was really disappointed, not for any other reason that I liked him, that I thought he would do better in the primary if I'm being honest. He never seemed to gain that traction, but I think he'd make a great VP. I think Stefanik would be. The one I don't like, and I'll pick your brain on it. Let me know what you think. You can reach out and comment at any time. Last week, I might have brought it up on the show. The name Tucker Carlson was thrown around as a potential VP nod. I would have to say I'm not that crazy about that idea. But you do have the factor of he's never governed, so you wouldn't really have to run on a record like we talked about. If Michelle Obama were to get in, as Cindy Adams speculates that she will, or an Oprah or someone like that who doesn't have anything that they really can hang their hat on with legislation, so that's seen as a positive thing. But I know I said I was going to talk to DeSantis. I didn't mean to get on the Elise Stefanik kick there for just a moment, but I would love to hear your take. Who would you like to see as the VP? Are you more of a Stefanik person, more of a Tim Scott, J.D. Vance, maybe someone else out of left field? Okay, Ron DeSantis did suspend his campaign, as you are aware by now. He did back the former president, Donald Trump. Following our second-place finish in Iowa, we've prayed and deliberated on the way forward. If there's anything I could do to produce a favorable outcome, more campaign stops, more interviews, I would do it. But I can't ask our supporters to volunteer their time and donate their resources if we don't have a clear path to victory. Accordingly, I am today suspending my campaign. And then he went on to say, though he has his disagreements with Trump, like on the handling of COVID and things like that, he did say that Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. The now ex-candidate added he was endorsing Trump because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear, a repackaged form of warmed-over corporatism the GOP rival Nikki Haley represents. The days of putting Americans last, of kowtowing to large corporations, of caving to woke ideology are over. Now, I know some people are saying, well, maybe DeSantis would make a good VP. They're so similar, though, and I don't know if Trump would like that. I mean, let's face it, I don't think I'm saying anything out of school here. DeSantis pretty much ran as a younger version of Trump. Not as forceful, of course, but that was kind of his shtick, if you will. Trump emailed this out yesterday. With only a few days left until President Donald J. Trump's victory in New Hampshire, we are honored by the endorsement from Governor Ron DeSantis and so many other former presidential candidates. It is now time for all Republicans to rally behind President Trump to defeat crooked Joe Biden and end his disastrous presidency. Nikki Haley is a candidate of the globalists and Democrats who will do everything to stop the America First movement. From higher taxes to decimating Social Security and Medicare and to open borders, she represents the views of Democrats more than the views of Republicans. It's time to choose wisely. So tomorrow is the big day. We'll be watching it close. According to recent polls, I had one here, but I don't know what I did with it. I got out of voter. Oh, there we go. This is coming from American Research Group. This is before DeSantis was out. Just to keep that in mind, because he's at 6. This was on the 20th. Haley's at 44. Trump is at 46. Again, that's American Research Group. I have heard, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit when we come back from break, but that he's actually, in other polls, seeing a double-digit lead, excuse me. Oh, by the way, this may be the best part about DeSantis dropping out. Whatever you think about him, the former president now has officially retired the DeSanctimonious nickname, not one of my favorites. The former president made his declaration as the nickname status during a campaign stop, prompting cheers from his supporters, saying that name is officially retired. Now, DeSanctimonious emerged in late 2022 after the midterm elections when the Florida governor became a serious contender. The former president routinely employed the nickname until the day that DeSantis dropped from the race and endorsed Trump. Not one of my favorite ones there. So now that is officially retired, DeSanctimonious. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. I don't want to run too late. Let's take a short break. Again, weigh in on this. What do you think about the VP nod? Do you think... So Haley, it's interesting because she's downplaying what was going to happen in New Hampshire. So if you recall early on, they said, I think it was Sununu, said, oh no, we're going to win it. We're going to outright win it. And then recently he said, I've never said that. We're just looking for a strong showing. And then Nikki Haley saying similar recently, we're just hoping for a strong showing. bigger showing than Iowa. She didn't criticize Iowa. She just said a stronger showing. So will she drop out if she doesn't get a win or a really strong showing? I know she wants to make the South Carolina, but polls don't look good there for her. Nevada, she's not on the line, I believe. There's something weird about Nevada. But is she just trying to make it till Super Tuesday, which very well could be the case? But I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. Thank you to everybody who has been reaching out all morning and who've sent in those virtual waves. I always appreciate the virtual waves. We've got a lot of guests, by the way, this week, and I forgot my calendar this morning, so I can't promote any of them. But I highly recommend that you tune in each day this week. I know one person I'm working on. I'm hoping we can make it work this week, but maybe next is Hornell Mayor John Buckley, after that big news that we brought to you this morning, ranked by Newsbreak number one place in New York State for affordability and just being a nice place, and that is Hornell. So we'll try to talk with the mayor later on in the week this week or early next week. Okay, stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're talking DeSantis. Isaac Shore from the New York Post, who's no fan of Donald Trump, had this to say: DeSantis's Trump endorsement proves he didn't have what it takes to beat the former president. And his thoughts on are that you shouldn't stoop and bow to the former president, as one of the ways that he put it. It was by far the worst moment of his political career because DeSantis had the audacity, I guess, in Isaac Shore's mind, to endorse Trump. Much scorn had been heaped on DeSantis for not fulfilling his campaign's promise. A year ago, he was well positioned to defeat Trump and restore Republicans' hopes of both defeating President Biden and installing a responsible, competent conservative leader in his stead. His failure to gain traction in the primary represented a political failure, but one he could reasonably attribute to events beyond his control. The decision to return to Trump on bended knee after spending the last year being the principal target of his deranged outbursts, however, was entirely his own. So kind of saying he sold out, if you will. In a post-Iowa message to DeSantis, J.D. Vance declared, "DeSantis is a very good governor, and he'll have a bright future if he recognizes what many of us recognized months ago. Trump will be our nominee, and the most useful thing all of us could do is focus on beating Joe Biden." Translation, according to Isaac Shore: if you continue to defy Trump, your record as a conservative stalwart in office will all be for naught. People like me are here to make sure of it. If you acquiesce, perhaps there's hope for you yet. So I think, again, I think that Isaac Shore may be overplaying his hand a little bit here, to put it nicely. But he said, what's clear after Sunday is Ron DeSantis lacked the conviction that would have been necessary to prevail against Trump, meaning he didn't attack Trump enough. That's what they're saying. I mean, yes, he could have went down the path of Chris Christie. How did that work for Chris Christie? But continuing, the best that could be said for him is he's made the same choice most Republicans have, willingly submitting to Trump's leash in exchange for the fleeting illusion of influence he affords them in return. So that's Isaac Shore from Mediaite. I wanted to get your take on that. Weigh in on all of these issues this morning. Some are saying that it's kind of a double-edged sword. Well, it says here two-edged sword. That's kind of a weird way of putting it. I've never heard it said that way. But David Mark of CNN says it's a two-edged sword for Nikki Haley. That DeSantis dropping out is both a positive and a negative, if you will. DeSantis supporters, limited though they were, comprise one more group of voters from which Trump can add to his already healthy lead over Haley. Yeah, I mean, I don't see someone who was going to vote for DeSantis going to Haley. And DeSantis himself is no longer around as a political deflector shield as Haley heads into Tuesday's critical New Hampshire primary. A CNN poll released Sunday before DeSantis withdrew from the race found he was the first choice of 6% of likely New Hampshire voters. That put him far behind in the poll conducted by the University of New Hampshire, with 50% of likely New Hampshire GOP primary voters backing Trump and Haley garnering 39. And that's the number I was trying to look for this morning that I was mentioning to you. So Trump at 50, again, it's a CNN, so take it with a grain of salt, but 50, Trump 39 Haley. That's before DeSantis dropped out. Most likely, you would think that 6% will either not vote or vote Trump, you would think. When DeSantis supporters were reallocated to their second choice candidate, however, Haley's support widened slightly to 41%, but Trump's support ticked up to 54%. Another 3% said that they will vote for someone else. I don't know who, I guess write somebody in. This isn't particularly surprising since the whole concept of DeSantis' campaign was being a Trump mini-me. In Florida, he picked cultural issue fights over the content of social studies textbooks, played up COVID-19 pandemic issues, and tangled with the state's largest employer, Disney, among other actions that were likely to play well with the populist right. So anyway, I don't see this helping Haley, but I don't see it necessarily hurting Haley either. They've already tried to, anyway, set expectations low after setting them too hard, saying that she was going to win outright in New Hampshire, and now walking it back and saying, we never said we were going to win outright. We just want a good showing. So DeSantis' departure isn't likely to change the dynamics between Trump and Haley. Yeah, Trump, I will say this, Haley has went more forceful after Trump. I'm not saying name calling, but questioning his mental health, questioning his age. So she's seeing an attack line there. Well, she really is the only alternative at this point. If you don't like Trump and you're a Republican, she is really the only alternative. So how will she do, and you can make your predictions, how will she do tomorrow in New Hampshire? Will it be like Iowa where they called it within a half an hour, or will it be a late night for all of us? Time will tell. But we got to take another short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. We're just talking a little bit about DeSantis suspending his campaign. Nikki Haley commented over the weekend, "May the best woman win." That's pretty clever. We just heard that Ron DeSantis has dropped out of the race. He ran a great race. He's been a good governor, and we wish him well. She emphasized that the race is now one fella and one lady, emphasizing that all the other men in the race have dropped out. And this comes down to, what do you want? Do you want more of the same, or do you want something new? Do you want to go back to a country where they decided who's a good person, who's a bad person, who's the right person, who's the wrong person? Or do you want to come together as Americans and say, you know what? You're going to get inflation down and you're going to get the economy back on track. We're going to get our kids reading again and go back to the basics in education. We're going to secure our border once and for all. And that her goal is a strong America that we can all be proud of. But for now, I'll leave you with this. May the best woman win. And her supporters went wild. She wants to be, as I mentioned, stronger in New Hampshire. In Iowa, I want to be strong. We did that. We started at 2%. We ended up at 20%. In New Hampshire, I want to be even stronger than that. And in South Carolina, I want to be even stronger than that. We'll find out what strong and stronger is on Election Day, but that's the goal. That's always been the goal. Now, Haley is averaging 15 points behind Trump in New Hampshire, according to a Real Clear Politics poll. The margin is the closest a candidate has gotten to the former president in months, but could be affected by DeSantis dropping out of the race on Sunday shortly after Haley's remarks. Now, Haley's campaign has always wanted to be a two-person race. She doesn't have to win, said New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu. Nobody goes from single digits in December to absolutely have to win in January. Now, that's a different attitude than he had before, where he said, assuredly, that she was going to win. If you're waiting for legal troubles or something external to take down Donald Trump, that's not going to happen. You beat him at the ballot box. That's democracy. The voters have to decide and move on, and they're going to. More and more are getting on the team with Nikki Haley every single day, said Sununu. She definitely has a chance. I don't know. Anybody has a chance, I guess, a puncher's chance, but she's got to make up some big ground. Now, she is going after Trump for, quote, mental fitness. She kind of dipped her toe in the water on this not that long ago, but now she's going full force on that because I guess Trump had made a comment almost referring to her as Nancy Pelosi. They're saying he got confused, that he was talking about something else. He's talking about Nancy Pelosi. He mentioned me multiple times in that scenario. The concern I have is, I'm not saying anything derogatory, but they're dealing with the pressures of the presidency. We can't have someone else that we question whether they're mentally fit to do this. We can't. So that's Nikki Haley going after Trump's mental health, as apparently he seemed to have confused her with Nancy Pelosi. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit, because she is in the attack mode. Well, she has to be. I mean, New Hampshire, no matter what they say, if it's strong or whatever word they use, she has to have a good performance. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Then some other topics to get to as well. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Thank you so much for joining us here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Just received this from a viewer. I'm thinking it was too early for DeSantis. He needs to focus on being a good governor for a few more years. Yes, he is young. I think a lot of people early on speculated that maybe it wasn't the right time for him, but he was trying to be kind of a copy of Trump without maybe so much of the brashness, and it just didn't stick. Haley is, as I mentioned, attacking Trump in New Hampshire. If you have someone that's 80 in office, their mental stability is going to continue to decline. That's just human nature, said Haley on Face the Nation on Sunday. She also railed against Trump's friendly relations with authoritarian governments, pointing to his, quote, bromance with Putin and, quote, love letters going back and forth to Kim Jong-un. Most recently, at a New Hampshire campaign event on Sunday, Trump commended Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has chipped away at the country's democratic system. So, yeah, she's obviously, I mean, let's face it, she's got to try something in New Hampshire. And no, she's saying she just wants a strong showing. Boy, they would really love to see a win there, though the polling has gotten better for Trump since Haley really started to nip at his heels, so to speak. But I would go back to the point from the viewer. Do you think DeSantis will give it another go in the future? He is a young guy. There's no reason to believe that he's done running for president. But did he have such a bad campaign that he won't be considered in the future as a viable candidate or as definitely a front runner? That's, I guess time will tell on that. The rollout itself was really bad, but you can forgive that or move on from that. But then not taking care of media. Now, I know that's a double-edged sword because you go to media and they're very biased, so it's difficult, but that's how he's got to get his name out, his personality out there. So do you think he'll end up running again in the future after a few more years, as this one viewer says, of being a good governor? Interesting. I would think this is not the last time we see DeSantis. Now, Kayleigh McEnany said Trump needs this tone for the next 9 months if he wants to beat Biden. I think Trump gets the DeSantis voter both in the primary and the general. The DeSantis voter tends to be a traditional conservative person of faith and then naturally translates to Donald Trump. Where I think his challenge is both here and going forward into a general election is winning over the Haley voters, winning over the establishment voters, winning over the independents, which is why I think that vice president pick is so important. And I would agree with McEnany on this. This VP pick is more important than what we normally see. Mike Pence was a good pick at the time, relatively unknown, kind of quiet. So it was an interesting pick from President Trump. Now it's going to be very important to win over some of the voters. To beat Joe Biden, there will need to be unity on the right. And it starts with treating potential allies as they drop out the way that we actually just heard from Trump, which is a little bit out of character for him. But I think strategically it makes sense being kind of soft-spoken when DeSantis got out, kind in a way, or consolatory. Maybe. I don't know if I completely agree with McEnany on that or not, but it is an interesting take. Conciliatory, right? Am I saying that right? So Nikki Haley. Oh, wow, I got to take my last break. This show has went quickly, but Trump's lead over Haley has widened to double digits. As I mentioned earlier, Trump holds 50% support among likely Republican voters, while his closest competitor, Nikki Haley, stands at 39%. Keep in mind that DeSantis was not taken out of this poll yet. It came out soon after DeSantis made his announcement. All right, we got to take our last break, and then we're going to wrap things up here on Frankly Speaking. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, just wrapping things up. There's a piece by Miranda Devine at the New York Post saying that Biden admits the border crisis he created is real, but won't accept any blame. We know one of the first things he did was sign an executive order to stop the policies of his predecessor, Donald Trump. He said at the time during the election, what I would do as president is immediately surge the border all those people who are seeking asylum. Well, that was one promise he kept with disastrous consequences. You can find this piece again at the New York Post for yourself, but it is interesting that you're starting to see more Democrats speak out about what's happening at the border. Even Democrat Senator John Fetterman, you remember John Fetterman, the controversy about his shorts and those type of things. He's breaking with his party again. He's done this a few times, saying migration crisis threatens to destroy the American dream, as another 300,000 people approach the southern border in hopes of crossing into the U.S. I honestly don't understand why it's controversial to say we need border security, he said. And what I think about immigration is we want to provide the American dream for any migrant. However, it seems very difficult when you have 300,000 people showing up encountered at our border to achieve that. Yeah, I think you will see, whether it's maybe a Governor Hochul, Mayor Adams in New York City, maybe more Democrats speaking out against the border because they realize that it's not polling well, that the voters themselves are fed up with it. John Furrier at the New York Post said how Biden gave up ridding us of criminal aliens and putting us in danger. We are out of time. Oh, by the way, I know we mentioned Tim Scott earlier. Congratulations to Tim Scott. He proposed to his girlfriend, the one that we learned about during the presidential run. I'm assuming, because it doesn't say otherwise, that she said yes. Oh, yes, there it is. She said yes. Mindy, thank you for making me the luckiest man in the world. Her name, Mindy Noce, N-O-C-E. So congratulations to Tim Scott. Maybe he'll be too busy to be VP, even though we've been talking about it. Well, thank you to everybody who weighed in. Thank you to everybody who commented on our topics this morning. Thank you again to Hornell Mayor John Buckley for that statement on Hornell being affordable and a great place to live. So we'll try to get him on the program very soon. We haven't talked to him in quite some time. We do have a lot of great guests coming up this week and next week, so you'll have to tune in. It's going to be busy. Tomorrow, of course, we'll be talking New Hampshire, talking about the last minute talks and rallies and protests and everything else. So that'll be coming up. Oh, here's one last comment from a viewer. The border situation is making it very difficult for legal paying immigrants to get their paperwork processed in a timely manner. Why give everything out for free when you have paying customers? Good point. That does it for us today here on Frankly Speaking. Please join us tomorrow morning starting at 7 a.m. only on WYDC TV Big Fox. I look forward to it already. We will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Have a great day, everyone.